when someone's got very complex products, with lots of specifications, lots of features, we use ChatGPT to do a comparison. So the writer will
Hmm.
use it to say, well, give me the comparison. What are the differences in these two products? And what are the features that might stand out for this particular demographic?
Hmm.
So it's an excellent co-pilot. It's an excellent partner for surfacing ideas and content and information that you give it. So it's excellent at analyzing text or entities and surfacing it, so your poor little tired brain doesn't need to read 15 different product specifications and then map it, which ones.
Hmm. Welcome back to SEOleverage.com. This is episode 118. My name is Gert and I'm very pleased to welcome Katrina McKinnon back to the show. Welcome, Katrina.
Thank you so much, Gert. It is delightful to see you again and just to have a fantastic conversation as we always do.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I always learn so much. You're definitely one of the main go-to experts when it comes to professional content creation, especially also on the larger scale. We regularly turn to. We have been working together on several projects as well. And I have seen your work. I'm really impressed. Continue to be impressed. And I'm also interested in knowing how your work really and your business life or your view of the content marketing world has changed lately because everybody's still on this AI drive. I would say it seems to be tuning down a little bit. I think it was overhyped initially. Things now seem to be coming back to how can we actually use this thing. What is your take on what's going on right now?
I've got some really fun stories for you. So, one of my first fun stories is that we have now seen the case of the first affiliate who's been knocked back for quality, for not adhering to quality guidelines in their AdSense program. So, Google's not coming out and saying, we're going to ban your website, we're going to, black ban it, sandbox it, whatever those words are that the SEOs we all use. But there is the first case where someone has built a website purely with AI, and Google has rejected it from the AdSense program for quality guidelines. And you can read about that on originality.ai. So that's the first fun thing. We're also hearing people are coming back and asking if we could fix their AI content. So that's always a fun thing. But the thing that I sort of, the thing, it's like, oh gosh, but the thing that I sort of want to say to people is it's a really, it's actually very clear if you think about it in common sense terms. So in 1989, when we wanted to create a logo, we had to hand draw it with paint and pencil and paper, and then we had to use a $10,000 or $20,000 bromide machine to take a photo of that logo, and then the negative plate that was produced had to be couriered by car off to the printers to be put onto your business card. Because a bromide machine was so expensive, the technology wasn't very advanced, there weren't very many graphic designers around. And it was very expensive to get a good quality logo made. So only a graphic designer who was willing to invest in their skills and time and equipment was working as a graphic designer. Fast forward, and then Photoshop came along and it was $895. Now, I think we can all agree that you could throw a stick down the street and hit a graphic designer in the head. Not only that, but you could throw a stick into the internet and you could find a $10 logo. So what's happened is that when Photoshop became very affordable, a lot of people started creating logos. Anyone who could use the tool would create a logo. Now, we know for an absolute fact that a serious business doesn't necessarily want a $10 logo for their entire business, life. And it's exactly the same with these AI tools. So scale.ai, and there's a whole bunch of them. There's Jasper.ai, all of these sort of tools. They allow anyone for very affordably, and ChatGPT very affordably, to create an article or to create content. That doesn't mean that it's any good. But And we can see as well, but I was sort of speaking to my father about this today with my frustration for this. And I said to him, it's like eating McDonald's, like McDonald's is rubbish food. It can't sustain you. It fills a hole, for a minute, but it can't sustain you. And I was like, why? And then I was like, but hang on, McDonald's is one of the largest, businesses on the planet.
Mhm.
So I'm swimming against this tide of what I think is common sense. Don't eat McDonald's every single day for your meal. Don't use ChatGPT to produce very average content. But anyway, the internet's not listening, so it'll take a little while for the tide to turn.
I love the comparison with McDonald's because it just shows that convenience very often rules, right? So it's just so
Totally.
convenient. I did my own experiment. We created a local dentist website completely with AI. It started ranking. It's really like frustrating. This thing just works. But you see after a few weeks, the results and that the rankings drop. It's just not the same thing, right? I mean, there is a reason why we didn't fire anybody of our five writers team here because it's just we definitely use those tools on in our end, but we use them really as like a first draft of part of an article, which kind of
Yeah,
gets you going. We have refined very, very much the process, how we use it, which facts we feed in, what the
yeah,
preparation is, what the brand voice training needs to be doing, etc. And I'm looking forward to seeing what tools can do there, and especially the fact checking is going to be an interesting one. But it's really funny. We have people reach out to me directly after ChatGPT like hit the news and say, "Hey, we're canceling everything."
yeah,
Because everybody's
yeah,
going to use ChatGPT to search. Nobody's going to use Google anymore. So what's the point of SEO?
yeah.
Um, we had interesting conversations. They signed back up. They increased even the program with us because once they understand how this all works and how where this information comes from and how those tools actually don't produce an answer but just something that sounds like an answer, then the
Yeah.
entire game changes, right?
Yeah, and it's right. Like, I think we sort of felt that as well. Is people were sort of going, "Oh, well, we're not going to get any content written because we can just use Chat GPT now." And I understand your point to the convenience is very valid. People, business owners are so busy; they're doing a million things, and they don't have time necessarily to really make sure that that quality is coming through. But it's a fun thing because I sort of think I sort of talk to people about Google and the AI tools, ChatGPT. They scrape the internet for information. Now, unfortunately, they don't actually want to eat their own dog food. That's not something they're interested in. So I sort of say to people, like a query like what is a fountain pen? You simply don't have to write that anymore because Google already knows and it'll provide the answer and the snippet, and the AIs will also answer that. But if I was to produce a brand new product that no one has ever seen, and let's say it was a fountain pen that had a torch on the end of it and had sparkles coming out of it, and maybe it vibrated to massage your hand, um, the LLMs, the large language models, and Google, they don't know what that thing is. They've never heard of it. They've never read about it. They've never scraped that content. So people are still going to need content to sort of tell the world about their brand new Sparkle Unicorn pen. And Google and the LLMs, the AIs, are going to come around and they still want to read that content. They still want to scrape all that content. So, it will, like Gert, it will come full circle. It's just that there's a new technology. It's very interesting, and it sort of caught everyone by surprise. So everyone will settle down. It'll all come full circle.
It's such a good point. It's like if they don't know something, they just make it up,
Yeah.
right? It's very very much like politicians very very often have those speeches where you feel like they just kind of composing their speech based on 25 components they learn sometimes, and it all sounds the same, and it's obviously dull. And it also happens with brands, right? So very a lot of brands, probably definitely including my own as well. We're not Microsoft, we're not Google, we're not Amazon, we're not well known enough so that people on a wide range of people would know us. But then again, when you people still use those tools now to ask about those brands. They say, is this and this person legit? Can this and this company help me? Does this and this company have a good product? And the answers are shocking. I had like an experiment where I asked, I think it was Bart, Google's ChatGPT variant, so to speak, and I asked, what are the top 10 running shoe brands?
Yeah.
And it was funny because Nike didn't come back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I asked a follow-up question, said, why isn't Nike in this top 10 list? It seems weird. And he said, yeah, they have manufacturing issues. And I was like, what? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that's
And then
you
I
let them
got
know,
really
like, you know,
interested. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I even documented this then on LinkedIn because I found it really, really interesting. I started to dig deeper, and it goes back to one review that was left on one website where one person talked about one model and some issues that probably go back to manufacturing. So this is how then the AI models use this text to get trained on it.
yeah,
And this is where now brand awareness is at a completely different level. We have been doing ORM, online reputation management, for 10 years minimum, I think even 15 years probably, where we essentially help brands polish their image when somebody searches for them or searches for their reviews, etc. But this is now a completely different thing, and this is skyrocketing because
mm,
if every single review out there that's not contrasted on the same page can train an algorithm to tell you that Nike is not a top shoe brand, this is a completely different situation now.
yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I think that that brand management is going to come through far more to the fore because the LLMs, the AIs, and Google are now trying to work out who to trust for what. Because SEOs, as we know, are always we're always trying to fudge the little edges as much as we can. And you know, we're seeing now that people are creating fake author profiles. They're trying to trick the AI to think that, you know, this is a legitimate website. You know, this is a legitimate author. I mean, these tricks have been around for absolutely ages, but I sort of think all the updates that Google has been creating over the last sort of 8 years, 10 years, they are all leading towards this kind of engagement metrics, and even engagement metrics can be faked by bot traffic. But it's really who are these people and who's real. So, for example, you and I having this conversation, there is a particular cadence to the way we speak. There is a particular pattern in the word usage.
Mhm.
And, you know, if I've made another couple of videos that are, you know, are available online, that pattern of the way I speak and my word patterns are able to be compared with this one. So Google and the AIs can come along and say, well, that's unique content. It's got Katrina's pattern. That's probably legitimate. She's probably a brand authority or a brand leader for that particular organization.
Mhm.
So the tool, the scrapers are now scraping audio and they're scraping video very easily. You know, we can now get transcripts straight out of YouTube. So we've got a tool that we use. I forget what the name of it is. Harper AI. And it can just scrape an entire YouTube video and give you the key talking points, and then you can say to it, "Oh, what question should I ask on LinkedIn of this person in that video that they've just released?" And so there's this lack of authenticity that's coming through, and I think that's where the next pursuit is going to be for SEOs, is how to really work with clients to create an authentic online reputation that's actually tangible and real and solid.
It's definitely getting more holistic, right? It's funny because I had been running an like full service agency for probably 10, 15 years until we decided to completely focus on SEO. And it's interesting now how some of those capabilities or those trainings and experience points we were able to get back then now actually get relevant again, right? So
Yeah,
we say, okay, it's obviously we want to get those rankings, but we don't want them if they don't convert. So conversion has always been a big part of SEO here. But now it's really this brand awareness thing as well. How can I get people? How can I raise brand awareness, because more people searching for a brand could actually indicate to Google that this brand is more legit.
yeah.
How do I need to create content, and where do I need to distribute it in
Mm.
order for more language models to pick it up? So some
Yeah,
old stuff like press releases even come out again,
yeah.
right? So it's
Press
suddenly
press
interesting
releases
again
are
to,
back.
it's crazy. It's crazy. Press releases were dead.
Yeah,
There were
and they're
dead
totally back
crocodiles
again.
floating around. It's so crazy. It's so crazy now. Press releases for brands is one of the main things you probably want to do moving forward, just to make sure
Yeah,
that there's a higher chance for language models to pick up part of this as consistent content.
Yeah, because they need that consistent story. So that's the other thing we've spoken to Jason Barnard about is creating that very consistent brand story that is interwoven in every single micro content, every single content piece and it's more than just a tagline. It's the narrative. It's the words that you use. And that consistency tells Google that that's really, all those connection points, which says, well, this is a real thing. A real human's made up of lots of different cells, lots of arms and legs and hairs and, eyebrows and all the bits and pieces. And so Google's just looking for all those little telltale signs. That means that it's a real person, that it's a real thing. And so if you're missing a nose, well, apart from, obviously accidents, but if you're missing a nose, you're not really a human. You may be an
Yeah,
android.
yeah,
And so Google's really looking for those tells that show that maybe this isn't a real company, that they're not really invested in their customers or their brand. But, and I also think, Gert, that these businesses, I hear again a lot of e-commerce stores. I primarily work with e-commerce stores, but clients are sort of saying, oh my goodness, how do I make sure that I can be found? And I was going to say, I've lost my train of thought just then, but um, I've lost my train of thought, but yeah, it's this interesting thing where this brand awareness is coming back to the fore.
absolutely. And I also wonder how many platforms people really need to cover, right? So
Yeah.
if you brand awareness, obviously a lot of brand awareness is being raised on socials. Very often, I find it really hard as an agency to have people with social media because in order to drive this authenticity, you need a lot of video content, you need a lot of experience reports, you need a lot of stories, etc. And there are agencies obviously focusing on this. What do you think it takes for a company, for like an e-commerce site right now to really drive the brand awareness?
I think it's now better quality content. You don't have to create so much content at scale. So for a little while, everyone was talking about velocity, and how velocity of content and producing a lot of content would attract Google, and Google would come and crawl. Google, it's well known now that I believe that Google's crawl budget has been decreased and the language models as well. It's very expensive to crawl all of the internet. So they're really only looking for the best quality content. And I think information gain is going to become extremely important. I think that if Google comes around to your website and it sees what is a fountain pen, or it sees, 5 best fountain pens for Father's Day, and it thinks, I already know all that information. If it doesn't trigger something in the algorithm about, well, this site is a good source for information gain, then I think it won't come back and crawl as often. So I would say to people that you need to still be producing content, particularly about the products that you sell. You need to produce content that's more interesting or educational for your clients or for your customers to use. And I think that visuals matter a whole lot more. So the language models and Google, they've come around and they've all been text based. But I think they can now interpret images. They can now interpret video, or podcasts, audio, and they're interested in, access to more areas. So I would say as well, just make sure that the content that you do produce is very rich, a lot of rich media in it, a lot of visuals in it.
That's it.
But so
That's
again,
really interesting. Yeah, that's no, I love that. I love that. Which definitely matches our experience as well. Information gain, just in case somebody hasn't heard it, we explain this like a plus one or something like this. What do I have that nobody else has on this particular page, where Google would say, hey, this is something new. That's definitely more valuable. It does become interesting, obviously, when AI needs or tools need to make sure they don't use AI content for the next answer and
yeah,
consistently dump down their answers a little bit this way, which already is happening sometimes. We have seen some examples where when AI might actually use AI content to give an answer, and that's a
yeah,
difficult one. But the cost that you mentioned, we have been talking about it for a long time. It's just Google. Google does need to spend money in order to crawl a website. And this is
yeah,
what many people don't realize at all. They think, okay, this is this endless amount of money with this huge corporation, etc. They spend actual money to crawl every single page, and I mean, we could see here and as SEOs a lot of more potential to save money actually, because they still crawl a lot of stupid stuff on a website they actually couldn't know that it's not available. But we also see more and more sites struggle to get articles indexed that are actually legit and elaborated articles, just because a big part of the rest of their articles are low quality. So where the engine just says, hey, I know that this particular website always gives me quality content, so I'm more inclined to crawl their new content. Whereas this other
Mm.
site, that 80% of their stuff is AI written or just some spun up content from other sources, is less valuable. So for a site, in order to make sure that you consistently get your content out there, especially if you produce content on a regular basis, like an e-commerce site, a publishing site, or just rely on those new content pieces for news sections, etc., it's really important to look at the entire website and say, hey, this is all quality. I don't have anything that's not quality for Google to be accessed and to be indexed. And this is where we also see a lot of gain very often, where we initially audit a website and say, hey, let's take all these off the page, all these pieces of content, so Google can
Yeah.
actually focus on what you really want to communicate.
Yeah, we're seeing that as well, Gert, that when we produce content, we don't need as much of it anymore. And as long as it points into the collection pages will often rank very well.
Yeah.
A healthy e-commerce site, the collection page will most often rank. An unhealthier website, and even though people think, maybe it's better, but we see less websites ranking their product pages. And then I actually think you've got problems if only your blog content ranks. So we've got a couple of clients that we've sort of that I've sort of broken their websites because their stores, because we can get all their blog content ranks brilliantly. We get a huge
Mhm.
amount of traffic, but it doesn't. You've got to be careful that it's always on intent and that you've got a mechanism, you've got conversion mechanisms really well bedded in. I mean, this is something that people say to us is, why isn't my content converting? It's kind of like, because you haven't put any conversion mechanisms in it. You need to do that as well. But I think that, the ChatGPT tools are like, I think they have got a place there. We'll give you one example. When someone's got very complex products, with lots of specifications, lots of features, we use ChatGPT to do a comparison. So the writer will
Mhm.
use it to say, well, give me the comparison. What are the differences in these two products? And what are the features that might stand out for this particular demographic?
Mhm.
So it's an excellent co-pilot. It's an excellent partner for surfacing ideas and content and information that you give it. So it's excellent at analyzing text or entities and surfacing it, so your poor little tired brain doesn't need to read 15 different product specifications
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
map it, which ones.
We used to do that. It's
Still, yeah, I used to.
definitely gets interesting, right? We use it, for example, now more and more, because as in the content writing division here, we obviously work with a lot of expert content as well. Have more experience here than we do. But what we found interesting was that we can now finally use like a podcast transcription and turn it
Yeah.
very efficiently into a piece of content. Just extracting, like you say, those main points. What are the main points that were talked about? What are the topics? What are the different angles? What kind of examples were given, etc. And you create essentially a brief to then hand over to an expert writer and say, look,
Mm.
this is the information I want you to write about. You don't have to do any additional research. It's all in there because they were talking about this topic for 45 minutes. It's all in there. Just put this into a shape that's easy to read, that's helpful for a reader, that's user friendly, that has the visuals, that has the summaries, that has the lists and tables and all those kinds of things, and then produce a valuable piece of content. I think where people need to compare AI or ChatGPT or other tools like this more to an intern they have in their
Mm.
team and say, hey, this is an intern, and the intern would get all those specifications and would say, hey, do those comparisons, elaborate this for me, and then I'm going to write this content, rather than thinking this is like a one-stop shop where I just put something in and I get my quality article already published on my site. There are tools that pretend to do this, but we have found there is a lot of work necessary afterwards and a lot of fact checking before you actually can do this. You wouldn't publish an article that comes from an intern, even if it looked legit. You wouldn't publish it. You would go through it, you would edit it, and then you would publish it. But people just think now this is all solved. And you really need to break it down to an individual use case and say, okay, for the blog content process, this is how we use it, this is how we don't use it, and this is how we then manually refine it.
Yeah, but it's so tempting, isn't it? It's like, you and
100%.
I are convinced, and we understand what this, narrative that is that we're trying to sort of convince others of, and but it's one of these things where, and I sort of say to my clients, I sort of say, our clients are mostly in the, and yours as well, mostly in the multi-million dollar mark, and I sort of say to them, you've got a multi-million dollar business. Do you really want to risk it? Like, it's a very risky thing to do when it's so brand new. Why don't you wait until everyone else has jumped off the cliff first and then just peer over the cliff and see whether they're intact? And so this is the thing, as I sort of think there's no hurry. Like, people are often in such a hurry to embrace a new technology, but there's a sweet spot. There's a sweet spot to embracing new technologies and working out how to use it, but it's not sort of saying, this is God's gift to SEOs and content writers. Let's, all hail, thank you very much. Let's bring it down and let's use it to write everything. So I agree with you. But interns burn out. This thing won't ever burn out. It'll just get better. And that's the
Absolutely.
temptation.
Absolutely, but it is funny for me because people, if I have two quotes from two writers and one charges $5 and one charges $50, I do automatically expect a better result from the $50 writer, right?
Yeah.
However, now I have a tool that's free and I expect it to be at the level of the $50 writer, and I just trust that this is going to be the case, and I publish it, and off it goes. So it's really funny to see how people just forget about 90% of what they believe in just because something is convenient. I think there's a big lesson here, and I think a big psychological experiment as well for the universities to study how this adoption worked. And you see people that are like 60 years old suddenly install apps and searching in those apps. They have no idea where the content comes from. They have no idea where the information comes from. They just trust it because it's just so convenient.
One of the things I love is that the universities are very worried about the students using ChatGPT to write essays, and then the universities are now implementing ChatGPT to help them mark essays, and then they're using ChatGPT to write the courses to teach the students that the students then write the essays on to. You know, snake eating its tail, and I sort of go, what is wrong with you all? It's okay for you to use chat gpt to create efficiencies, but it's not okay for those people. I sort of think, oh gosh, it'll all settle down. It'll all settle down. But I think you made that point, Gert, that like, and we've sort of seen this as well, that all the content mills, I think a lot of them are really struggling. There's a lot of job losses through there. I know that Scale AI and Jasper have laid off loads of people in their workforce as well. So these lower quality tier content producers, they sort of think, well, we've got Chat GPT now, so our quality's moved up, but they don't realize that we were already at that level and we've moved up. So we've
Yeah,
moved beyond them because we use the tool in a different way. But it is fascinating to see what's happening in our industry, because I'm sure, like, people in the SEO world think, well, what's happening with Google? Is all of Google going to disappear? Well, is my position in Google going to disappear? And I sort of say to people, Google literally relies on e-commerce stores to fund them. That $1 trillion didn't fall out of the sky. It came from e-commerce stores. So why on earth would Google no longer allow you to promote your products in its search, in the results pages? It's just going to change slightly. And just like Google built AdWords to help extract money from all of us, it's going to keep developing those tools to keep extracting money from business owners. So, I don't think it's all going to change that dramatically.
absolutely. I definitely agree with this. We're going to see where this really goes. Just to wrap this up a little bit, if you had an e-commerce store right now, and you were like looking at all this situation, what kind of like three decisions you would make, or what kind of three guidelines would you pursue in the next months in order maybe to not overreact, but also not to lose potential advantages that this current technology could give you?
I think that you've got to be very careful with your writing team. Writing is a creative process and people burn out. So I see that time and time again, that people think, oh, well, now I've got a writer. I'll just burn through them. And the writer, they get tired and they will try to turn to ChatGPT. So be careful with people. Be very human. The other thing I would say is pictures, visuals, images. That is still, there's still an opportunity in the search engine results pages to, there's a gap. Not many people produce very high quality images and digital assets. So things like PDFs, Photoshop files, AI files, unique images, unique photo images, unique videos, podcasts. It's still very hard to produce all of that manually, and AI can't do that yet. So again, that's still a gap for people. And then the last thing I would say is just go steady. I would say that you've got to remember that content and SEO is like a snowball. You give the snowball a little push and it rolls down the hill, but you've got to keep pushing the snowball. You can't pick up the snowball and look at it and say, is the snowball working? Is it getting bigger? Because one day you'll think to yourself, gosh, that snowball's huge and it's going down the mountain by itself. It's got its own momentum. SEO, content, all the type of work that we do takes a great deal of patience, and you can't see the snowball getting bigger as it goes along. It's a bit like paid search, paid advertising and AdWords. It's like a rocket ship. You shove a bit of fuel into it and it goes up and it makes a big bang and it's very, interesting, and, it has a big impact on everyone. As soon as you stop paying for the fuel, it crashes to the ground and it's got nothing. But a snowball is just patience, and you have to be kind to the snowball, and you have to trust that the snowball, if you keep giving it a push, it will eventually roll down the hill by itself one day and it'll be enormous.
Going to leave it with this image. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Katrina McKinnon. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, talk about content strategy, content marketing, what's the best place to find you?
Just on LinkedIn, Gert. Everyone can just find me on LinkedIn. That's where all the cool kids hang out, on LinkedIn.
Absolutely, I agree. Definitely going to link to your LinkedIn profile. By the way, this is episode 118. We have a written summary, fact-checked and written, edited by one of our writers here over at seoleverage.com/podcast, episode 118. Katrina McKinnon, thank you so much for taking the time again to talk to us. And I hope we can welcome you back in the show sometime in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gert.